Sandra Bullock stepped into the luxurious boutique, her high heels clicking against the polished marble floor. She'd spent the past week buried in back-to-back meetings and endless script readings. The stress had been wearing her down, and today, she'd decided to treat herself. It wasn't about the money or the status, it was about finding a small piece of happiness amidst the chaos of her career. The boutique before her was known for its exclusivity, its reputation among the rich and famous. Gilded mirrors reflected the sleek, expensive clothing hanging in pristine displays, and the air was thick with the scent of fine perfume and fresh flowers. Despite her fame, Sandra couldn't shake the feeling of being out of place. The customers around her were dressed in flawless designer outfits, their every move oozing wealth and refinement. Her casual jeans and simple top felt out of sync with the glitzy environment. But she shook off the discomfort. She was Sandra Bullock, after all. She was used to being in the spotlight. Yet, there was something about this place, this suffocating atmosphere of exclusivity, that made her feel like an outsider. As she wandered further into the boutique, her eyes caught the gleam of a beautiful dress displayed in the corner. It was soft and elegant, everything she had hoped to find, but she needed help. Someone to guide her through this maze of high-end choices. That's when Claire appeared. Claire, the boutique manager, had a reputation. She'd built her career curating exclusive collections for the most demanding clientele, earning a reputation for her icy professionalism and impeccable taste. Dressed in a sharp, tailored suit that radiated authority, Claire approached with a look of detached elegance. She was the epitome of luxury, but there was something in her eyes. A cool, appraising glance that seemed to measure everyone in her path, as if she were determining their worth based solely on appearance. Sandra flashed her a warm smile, hoping to bridge the gap. "Hi, I'm looking for something elegant, something I can wear for a dinner. Maybe something special?" she asked, her voice steady but kind. Claire's eyes flickered over Sandra for just a moment, her gaze lingering for a split second longer than was necessary. Her lips barely parted as she spoke. "Of course. What kind of special are you thinking?" The judgment was almost invisible. But Sandra felt it, a subtle hint that maybe she wasn't quite the boutique's type of customer. Sandra's eyes landed on a stunning dress, deep emerald green with delicate lace detailing and a simple yet sophisticated cut. It was everything she wanted, and more. She felt a flutter of excitement as she approached it, ready to ask Claire for more details. "I'm really drawn to this one," Sandra said, her fingers lightly grazing the fabric. "Do you think this might be a good choice?" Claire's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of judgment crossing her face. She stepped closer, her voice dripping with condescension as she looked over the dress. "It's bold," Claire said, her tone barely masking her disdain. "But I'm not sure it's quite right for you. It doesn't seem to fit your brand, if you know what I mean." Sandra's smile faltered and a chill crept down her spine. Claire was insinuating that the dress was too daring for her. Too much of a risk, perhaps. As if the idea of Sandra stepping out of her comfort zone was somehow wrong. Sandra tried to brush it off, but the words stung. "You might want to try something more subtle," Claire added, her voice even colder now. "Something a bit more safe. After all, not everyone can pull off a statement piece like this." Sandra's breath caught for a moment, the sting of the manager's words seeping into her confidence. She forced a smile, her cheeks warming with the discomfort of being so openly criticized. "Right. I'll look at something else then." As Sandra moved to the next rack, Claire continued to hover around her, each of her dismissive remarks growing sharper, more cutting. Sandra asked about a few other dresses, hoping to find something that would resonate. But with each inquiry, Claire's responses became more patronizing. "That one's too much for you," she'd say. "That's not really your style, maybe something simpler would suit you better." The boutique's other customers, noticing the exchange, began to glance in Sandra's direction. She could feel their eyes on her, like invisible hands poking at her, judging her every move. It wasn't just Claire anymore. It was the whole room, a silent consensus that Sandra wasn't good enough for this place. The weight of their stares pressed on her chest, and she could feel the cracks in her self-esteem beginning to widen. Her hands began to shake, but she tried to hide it. She had been through so much, yet in this moment, It felt like she was nothing more than an imposter in the very world she had worked so hard to be a part of. Then, just when Sandra thought it couldn't get worse, Claire delivered her final blow. "Perhaps," Claire said, her voice dripping with disdain, "you'd feel more comfortable browsing the lower-end section. It's a bit more suited to your tastes. I'm sure they'll have something nice for you there." Sandra's face flushed with humiliation. It felt like a slap to the face, her worth being dismissed so openly. Her throat tightened, and her vision blurred. She couldn't hold it back any longer. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly, not wanting to break in front of everyone. She nodded stiffly, forcing her body to move toward the exit. Just as she reached the door, her hand on the handle, a voice suddenly called out from behind her. "Wait!" Just as Sandra's hand touched the door handle, ready to escape the suffocating atmosphere, the chime of the boutique's doorbell rang, signaling a new arrival. Sandra barely looked up, but the shift in energy was undeniable. The customers straightened their backs, the hushed whispers began, and Claire, who had been cold and distant with Sandra, instantly brightened. Her posture straightened, her lips curving into a wide smile as she practically glided toward the new guest. Johnny Depp had entered the boutique. He was effortlessly cool, dressed in faded jeans and a leather jacket, looking like he had just stepped out of a bohemian dream. His unkempt hair fell perfectly around his face, and his glasses were tilted just enough to make him appear both mysterious and charming. He wasn't wearing the extravagant designer clothes everyone else in the boutique was dressed in, but there was something magnetic about him that made him stand out more than any shiny outfit ever could. Claire's demeanor switched instantly. The aloof, unapproachable manager was replaced by the embodiment of eager professionalism. She rushed to greet him, offering exaggerated bows of respect. Johnny barely acknowledged her, his focus already scanning the boutique as he walked in. Sandra had turned back toward the door, feeling her chest tighten. She was about to leave, when Johnny's gaze caught hers. He paused, his brow furrowing as he took in her expression, an odd mixture of frustration and sadness. Without a word, Johnny crossed the room, moving with the kind of casual grace that made it look like he wasn't trying at all. Sandra, feeling the weight of the moment, didn't know what to do. She was still on the verge of tears, but before she could leave, Johnny reached her side and simply sat down beside her, without asking, without hesitation. He didn't offer empty words of sympathy. He didn't press her for details or try to fix anything. He just sat there, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "How's your day going?" Johnny asked, his voice warm and effortless. Sandra blinked in surprise. No one had asked her that in a long time, not with genuine curiosity at least. Her lips twitched into a small, involuntary smile. For the first time that day, she felt a little lighter. She let out a soft laugh, the sound almost surprising to herself. "It's been a bit of a disaster, actually," she admitted, shaking her head, the tension slowly melting away. Johnny grinned, his eyes twinkling with a mischievous spark. "Well, you've come to the right place. The day's only half done, right?" For the next few minutes, Johnny and Sandra spoke about everything but the boutique. The latest movie she'd seen, his most recent adventures, and even a funny story about a mishap he'd had with a costume on a film set. There was no judgment in his words, no awkward pauses, just a simple connection between two people who were both used to being in the spotlight but who were now only human together. Sandra had forgotten what it felt like to be just another person, not an object for others to scrutinize. For the first time that day, Sandra felt seen, not as a celebrity, not as a failure, but as someone who could laugh, relax, and be herself. As Johnny and Sandra continued to chat, Claire finally approached them, her heels clicking with purpose as she tried to return to her role. Her smile was forced, too wide, as if she'd been caught in an awkward moment. She leaned in toward Johnny, her voice laced with the practiced tone of exclusivity. "I do hope you're enjoying the boutique," she said, her eyes darting toward Sandra with a touch of disdain. "We pride ourselves on offering the finest, most distinguished pieces. I'd be happy to assist you with anything you might need. Of course, we cater to more specific tastes here." Johnny didn't flinch. He had already sensed the tension, the cold atmosphere of the boutique, And now, it seemed like Claire's attitude was about to make him do something unexpected. He turned to her with a smirk, leaning back in his chair as he casually tapped his fingers on the armrest. "Well, Claire," Johnny said, his tone playful but pointed, "I'm in the mood for something truly special. Why don't you bring me the most expensive piece in the store? The one you reserve for your most elite clients. I'm curious what you've got." Claire's smile faltered for a split second. She wasn't used to being called out, especially by someone with Johnny's star power. But after a brief pause, her pride and professionalism took over. She nodded stiffly, then turned to make her way toward the back of the store to fetch the piece. Johnny's gaze lingered on Sandra, a twinkle of mischief in his eyes. As Claire disappeared into the depths of the boutique, Johnny leaned closer to Sandra and spoke in a low voice, just for her. "Go ahead, pick out whatever you want," he said, his words simple but powerful. "Everything here. I'm buying it for you." Sandra's breath caught in her throat. "What?" she stammered, still processing his words. She looked down at the clothing surrounding her, feeling the weight of the moment. "Yes," Johnny affirmed with a nod. "Everything. You deserve to walk out of here today feeling like the queen you are. Pick out your outfit, don't hold back." Sandra blinked, disbelief flooding her senses. This couldn't be happening. She was no stranger to luxury, but this was something entirely different. She looked up at Johnny, overwhelmed by his generosity, unsure how to respond. Claire, who had returned with a set of glittering gowns draped across her arm, now stood frozen in place, a look of shock crossing her face. She had been dismissive just moments before, and now she seemed at a complete loss for words. Johnny gave her a knowing look. "It's not a big deal, Claire. I think it's time you remembered what customer service truly means." For a moment, the boutique seemed to freeze. Claire's jaw tightened, her face flushing as the realization of what was happening settled in. She tried to regain her composure, but Johnny wasn't finished. "Actually," he continued, his voice cutting through the silence, "I think we need a little reminder here. It's one thing to sell luxury. It's another to sell it with kindness and respect." His eyes narrowed as he looked directly at Claire, his tone sharp. "The way you've treated Sandra and people like her, it's unacceptable. This is not how you treat anyone, no matter their status." The room seemed to hold its breath. The other customers, who had been watching the interaction in silence, now looked around at each other, unsure how to respond. For the first time, Claire looked small. Her well-crafted facade cracked, and she stood there, frozen, unsure of how to react. It was as though Johnny's words had stripped away the power she had so carefully built around herself. Sandra watched, feeling a mixture of awe and relief. She had always known Johnny Depp was known for his generosity and his ability to stand up for what's right, but seeing it unfold right in front of her was something else entirely. Johnny turned back to Sandra, smiling gently. "There you go," he said, gesturing to the luxurious outfits she was now holding in her hands. "Enjoy the day, and remember, sometimes the world needs a little reminder of kindness." Sandra smiled, a true smile, one that came from deep inside her. She nodded, the warmth of his words settling in her chest. Johnny's gesture wasn't about the clothing. It was about showing her that she deserved to be treated with respect, no matter the judgment that came from others. She hadn't expected this, but it had given her something far more valuable than any expensive dress ever could. Her self-respect. And Johnny's simple kindness had restored it in a way nothing else could. As Sandra stepped out of the boutique, the weight that had been pressing on her chest all day seemed to lift. She no longer felt humiliated or small. With each step, her sense of self grew stronger, more grounded. The luxury items Johnny had bought for her didn't define her transformation. It was the kindness he had shown, the way he had treated her with respect, no different than anyone else. In that simple act, he had reminded her of her worth, something she hadn't felt in a long time. She realized then that her value wasn't defined by the opinions of others, by the cold judgments of a boutique manager, or by the fleeting gaze of a stranger. Her worth was hers to determine. And Johnny's support had cracked open a part of her that she had closed off long ago, reminding her that kindness and respect were the real luxuries. Johnny's gesture had been so much more than just a spontaneous act. It had broken through a barrier Sandra had built around herself over the years. a barrier made of doubt, fear, and the pressure to conform to others' expectations. Johnny didn't just buy her clothes. He had given her something far more meaningful. The confidence to walk away from a place that had tried to make her feel less than. As Sandra reached the sidewalk, she paused for a moment and turned to look back. Through the boutique's large windows, she saw Johnny laughing with the staff, his effortless charm creating a lightness in the room that hadn't been there before. The tension, the judgment, it was all gone. It was a day she would never forget. She smiled softly, feeling lighter and freer than she had in years. It wasn't about what others thought. It was about how you carried yourself in the world. And now, Sandra knew, she could carry herself with pride. Hey there, thank you so much for watching this story. I hope it resonated with you and left you feeling inspired. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to subscribe to stay updated with more heartwarming stories like this one. Like the video if it touched you, and feel free to comment below with your thoughts. We love hearing from you. And if you think a friend could use a little positivity, make sure to share this story with them. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and keep shining.